First of all, thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm privileged. I was psyched. I've never been on a podcast. This is my first time.
First time, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is also the first podcast that we're doing in person too. So I'm super excited about that because everything else has been done via Zoom. We've been on lockdown for what, 3 months now?
Yeah, about 3 months.
About
Yeah.
3 months. As of the time of recording this, New Jersey is actually the last state currently with stay-at-home orders, which obviously we're violating because I'm not at home.
Right.
I don't know how you feel about that,
But if the golf courses are open and the beaches are open and you can pick up just about anywhere, how you stay home just doesn't make sense. So once you have the stay-at-home order and you open things up, I just find it to be a...
well, there was a judge in Illinois that I think put it, he overruled the stay-at-home order there, and what I thought was especially powerful in what he said was the fact that he's like, you can drive to four of you can drive to the golf course in the same car and not get the virus. But if the four of you play in a foursome, you'll get the virus. A family of five can go to the lake in the same car and not get the virus, but if they get on the same boat, they're going to get the virus. Kids are most likely to not get the virus, yet all summer camps and all the outdoor activities are canceled. So there's a lot of like conflicting information in terms of what you can and can't do, what's safe, what's not.
Or even North Jersey versus South Jersey. If
Yeah.
I live in South Jersey, I'm not happy as that gym owner made it clear. You know, that
Well-
there were very few cases south of Lakewood, I guess would be the kind of southern limit of
Yeah,
the impact of the
Lakewood
virus.
being a hot spot because they didn't really do much social
Right.
distancing.
But south of there was very few cases, similar
Yeah.
to West Virginia, basically. So
Yeah.
they're living under the same standard that we are, which is fine, But it just
It's fine, but it's kind of bullshit.
it's tough.
It's
Yeah.
tough because you're decimating the entire state as opposed to trying to take a more regionalized approach to what's going on, and everybody suffers. And there's winners picked and losers picked. Like, you can go to Walmart and be fine, but someone selling the same stuff as Walmart up the street, no good.
Right, not open.
Yeah.
And my wife is a dental hygienist. She's back at work, but if you're a salon owner, you're out. So you can go get your teeth cleaned, but you can't get your fingernails painted. So that's an issue,
That
and you
actually-
wonder if there's a financial impact with that. And when you talk about leverage through politics and how much leverage do the dentists have as opposed to the salon owners. So the salon owners are taking a beating, where the pizza restaurants and now even the dentists are opening back up. So
You know what's interesting about that too is the fact that they say that, you're supposed to wear the mask because if you cough or it stays in your saliva, and that there's no way to avoid saliva in that situation.
correct.
So
Aerosols. The aerosols that are created is
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they seem to arbitrarily be opening up different segments of the world. It was funny. I always thought that it was Governor Murphy's golf buddies, and I know he says he doesn't play golf, and that's fine. But he still is supported by people who play golf and who have big money, and they wanted to go and play whatever it is golf course they were playing. He opened the golf courses very
Yeah.
early, and he did it under the guise of the state parks as well. But that being a Monmouth County guy, and this Monmouth County money, Monmouth County golfers had a huge impact on the state of New Jersey.
Sure. Now, you had mentioned a while back that while we were all kind of like still, I don't want to say we were okay with lockdown, but we were more accepting of the fact that, okay, we need to stay inside. You had a theory on what had actually happened and what was going on, why it was happening.
Right. So I mean, you kind of have to look at the history of all of these viral evolutions since about the turn of the millennium. So I've always kind of had this theory basically, which randomly for 9/11 is right when I transitioned from private school teaching biology to teaching public school biology. And not only that, I went from teaching anatomy and physiology as the most complicated class that I taught to advanced placement biology. So right at that time, around literally the first September that I taught at Wall Township High School was 9/11. So that was my second week of work and teaching all this in a new school, and we were kind of dealing with that whole situation with these kids. But also, a year after that, SARS pops up. So there was some discussions I had with my students and, other faculty and history teachers and, at that school at that time, there was like a think tank of young teachers, and we all shared from different perspectives: English teachers, history teachers, science teachers, and it was a big group that all shared all this kind of different common perspective to literature and politics and whatever you could think of. And we literally used to sit around in the teachers' lounge, which was a great place at that time and in that space. The teachers' lounge was welcomed, and it was a place where we met and shared ideas. But that there is a group, somebody, who decided they needed to find a way to do a version of biological or biochemical warfare and use viruses.
Mm-hmm.
So 2002 was SARS,
Right.
the first corona, the first
Sure.
novel coronavirus, which no one ever thought about until this March, and it's been around since about 2000.
So then why do you think that people haven't batted an eye at it since then?
I just don't think people like think about it. So when you have, I think it was 2002 was SARS, 2009 was H1N1, which is
Yep.
better known as
Bird
swine
flu.
flu.
Yeah.
Bird flu.
Wait, bird flu or swine flu? I forget. I think it was
H1N1 is swine flu.
Okay.
And then it's like 2012 is bird flu, and 2015 or 14 was the Ebola outbreak, which
Yeah.
I believe to be separate. I don't believe that the Ebola outbreak is related to some of these other ones. And then no one realized, I think it was about 2015, when MERS came out. No
Okay.
one knows what MERS even stands for.
Do you?
I do.
Okay, what does it stand for?
So-
Fill me in.
So just go back again look at it historically and with a political edge to it. You look at SARS, everyone knew sudden acute respiratory syndrome or
Yeah.
severe acute respiratory syndrome. So that's what it was. It was the first time we were introduced to the Chinese running around wearing face coverings.
Yeah.
First time that we ever saw it was about that time, and it hasn't relented in China since. They've never forgotten SARS.
Okay.
So then, you can look at the different vectors that you would use to spread a virus, but a part of this, which I can come back to, like a kind of like an underlying theme, would be the animals that are used to transmit or be the viral vector. So
Okay.
you can't perfect a virus in humans. It's impossible. But you can perfect a virus in pigs
What do you mean
or
by
in
perfect?
birds. Manufacture.
Okay, and why do you feel that you can't do it in humans?
How would you do that? It would go back to the pre-Stalin days or Hitler.
Well, I-
you'd have to take
Okay,
to
so
take
you're not
a
saying
group.
it's
I'm
not-
talking about the samples. In
Right.
order to, you have to sample. You can't take a virus and say, all right, it acted this particular way 1,000 times. 1,000 times isn't enough. You have to be able to say it interacted this way 125,000 times. And you might lose 125,000 pigs and no one's going to notice.
I see what you're saying.
But you're not going to lose
So it's not that you
125,000
physically
humans.
can't, it's that you can't do it without.
Correct. We'd have to
Getting
write
noticed.
that's a whole nother podcast of how we could eventually get there and what we could benefit if we could. Granted, not a perspective that I prefer or share, but
Right.
Anyway, so then go back to 2002, unknown animal. That's when they first started talking about the marketplaces in China, but they didn't know there's a bunch of different research that you can do. It was a version of a cat. It was a version of a dog. It was a version of
Well, like, for
a
example, my
raccoon.
cat has a version of coronavirus that he tests positive for, and it won't transfer to us, and it won't affect him at all as he lives his life. But if anytime he goes and gets blood work done, it shows up that it's in his system.
Right, right. So then, now get back to MERS. MERS went under the radar. MERS was, it never got here, it never got close to here, but it was definitely on the news if you follow the news, or I always follow the science of it. But MERS is something that people have mentioned MERS, and even I guarantee you some newscasters, and if you were in the audience and raise your hand and say, what does MERS actually stand for, they would stutter. So it's
Right.
Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome.
Okay.
So now go back to the concept of 2001, 2002, World Trade Center bombings, and then SARS. There has to be a group of people who need to be able to control that area of the world. You can't go to Tora Tora and just go into those caves and win those fights.
Right.
So MERS, now they've, the animal vector, also no one understands, was camels.
Oh.
So they actually were able to study if this is a version of manufactured, which is my opinion,
Well,
and that
yeah,
only there is
I
no
think that
fact.
regardless of what they say, there's always going to be the suspicion that this was manufactured in the lab, whether it was released intentionally, whether it was an accident. is, you know, up for debate. But I feel like most people already believe that the whole story of it transferring from a bat to a person to whatever is China trying to cover up.
Or anyone else, but if
Or-
you're going
or,
to
right.
be
Whoever
if-
did it is
if
trying
it
to
was a
cover it.
group of whatever the group of people are. Again,
Well,
that's
the
a
other
whole
flip side of
different
that too is that
perspective.
it's a fact now that China did deploy a cover-up effort in the beginning of this whole
Sure.
thing.
But they
because
always-
they underreported, they tried to not tell people about
They're not
it.
obligated to report to us.
They're not, but what's the agency that they are obligated to report?
WHO.
The WHO. So they are obligated to report to them, and they didn't in the beginning until December, January.
They're China. They're not obligated to report to anyone.
Well, yeah.
So that's the
From
best
a-
place to test, though. Say, because you can get to China.
Sure.
We could get to China before this thing happened, 2 years ago. Very easily, we could have gone back and forth to China and found a way to release the virus, and it's typically a controlled spread, like SARS.
Sure.
And MERS was also controlled based on the geography of where, if this was a group of people who did it, but you can then study how that, it would be a weapon, how
Sure.
you would be able to do that, and look what it did do. If you decide to really put the throttle down, and if you look at the cadence between the outbreaks, there's also that version that potentially, if there were a group of people, you would want to do, schools do fire drills twice a month.
Right.
We go out, fire drills, we have different active shooter drills, all these
Yeah.
different drills that all of the schools do in the state of New Jersey, nationwide. We do those every 2 months, but the CDC and the WHO, they don't have any fire drills. So there could be a group of people who aren't associated at all with government. I don't believe that they're associated with any government or
Okay.
military action, totally separate group of people. So you can literally do a fire alarm for the CDC by literally going over, and it might be infecting bats, but I joke around, you could stick a Chinaman. You could just go stick a couple of Chinamen with a virus, and they're going to spread it around because of the population density. So it's a
Yeah.
great place to test.
Well, yeah, and they said that I think it was 80% of the people in that market that were there that day contracted it. Even if they were only there that day in that very limited window, it could have literally just been originating from one person, and with how contagious it is, it spread throughout the world.
Correct.
So you think that this is more of a, now when you say fire drill, are you talking a group of people that are looking to up the preparedness or test the system, or is it they're more malicious?
I don't think it's malice. I think it's more like control of the world economy. The economy could not, Trump's economy is unsustainable. So Trump is Trump again. I would never want to have dinner with any one of our presidents, maybe JFK, Bush Jr., he'd be fun. But I don't want to have dinner with him, so I don't necessarily care. Don't want to have dinner with Obama, nor with Trump. So I don't care if they're impolite, rude, nice. It doesn't matter to me. I care about the price of a gallon of gas, price of a gallon of milk, and interest rates. So the economy had literally, inflation was zero.
Yeah.
So inflation, it worked. The concept did work. Like Trump's kind of like Reaganomics. It does work, but it's just not sustainable. There will be a crash after Reagan. You're bound to go into recession. Who knows what could happen post-Trump? So in an effort to basically chokehold the economy, you shut down the world.
So
You get rid of Trump. I think it got out of control, but
So you think that this was initially an effort to shut the economy down and slow the economy, or to just make it, like, to what end would you want to shut the economy down?
I mean, it's not about wanting to do
Or-
that, but it would be, it's so easy for, Trump would have walked into his second term.
Sure.
There's no way, because Americans vote based on what I was speaking of, the price of a gallon of milk and a
How
gallon of
much
gas.
money's in their bank account? because of the
Absolutely, and
president? Yeah,
everybody was
absolutely.
working, and I'm not crediting or discrediting, it doesn't matter, it could be luck, it is what it is, it could just be like regular fluctuations in the world and the United States economy, but it was definitely unsustainable, and his disregard for regulations was creating a concept that we were gonna crash and burn. So it was just make sure we don't crash and burn, get the fire drill going, and what it does is people realize, the Democratic Party can no longer say that, everybody gets free college. That doesn't matter now because you're realizing how, who's doing well? Pizza joints are doing
Yeah.
great. Contractors, this is a new home for us, our literally dream home. And we've had contractors in here and you can't even schedule them. You can't schedule a plumber, an electrician. We can't get trees removed because they're so busy. I
Yeah.
think that America is now going to realize that not everyone needs to college education for our country. Let's start to
Sure,
be a bit
I mean,
isolationist.
I-
And you know what? Every made in China could be a thing of the past. So if it is, it's going to be a great thing for our economy. And it is a theory that I've had since 2001.
So you bring up a good point, is the fact that in the past, prior to this, college was the only way. You graduate from high school, you have to go to college, which means taking out loans if your family doesn't have the ability to actually put you through college, or you go get a job somewhere else and you're considered to be a version of a failure, regardless of how much money you make. And yeah, I have a friend who works at a body shop right now who's making money hand over fist because he can't keep up with the amount of work that's coming in, because now people are saying, oh, I don't need to worry about whether or not I have my car because I'm not working, number
Right.
one, or I'm working from home and I'm not commuting anywhere.
Your family
So-
can exist on one car.
Right.
A husband and wife can exist on one car now, 100%.
Yep. So they've got people that have been putting off and putting off and putting off because they couldn't find the downtime to actually get their car into the shop. They've got a month waiting list just to get, and normal things. This isn't like a high end body shop that's doing like crazy custom cars or things like that. They're just your normal collision repair, and he's making money hand over fist because of the fact that now that everybody doesn't have to worry about their car, they can bring it in. They've already got the money because the insurance company's paying for it, and he's able to just crank out cars all day long. And you're probably not wrong in the fact that there's going to be a lot more people that see, okay, who are the people that didn't get hit in this whole thing? People that owned, to an extent, restaurants that were adaptable to takeout. They were-
Non-bar.
non-bar
restaurants did well.
non-bars, construction to an extent. I mean, everything.
They got a quick vacation and then
Right.
back to work.
They were down for a month, and then they were right back.
Right back.
Really, it's mostly just manual labor that is going to bounce back the quickest. Like you were talking about how your wife works in dentistry. That industry is, for a long time, I feel like people are going to be afraid to go to a place like that because of the way that it's
She's
spread.
built solid.
Oh, is she really?
Day one.
Really?
Day
Okay.
one, when they lifted the executive order, she worked the Tuesday after Memorial Day, and I think that she had 8 scheduled appointments and 7 showed up.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah,
I'm
so
wrong
she
about
was-
that.
She was fully booked on day one, and that was literally the first day open, which we might get back out to the restaurants and bars, but I'm not gonna be the first one in line, so there's
So
gonna be a
what
lot
do
of
you-
people in line.
What do you think is going to happen as far as the way that New Jersey opens up?
It's just gonna be life as usual very soon. Unfortunately, it's gonna impact the kids the most. And then I think the biggest hurdle, people look at the government to provide them all of their solutions, and
Mhm.
I don't need the government to tell me how it is that I need to live or to behave.
Sure.
Some of those decisions as citizens we make on our own, and that is our fundamental right. But I think that the biggest hurdle for government is going to be opening the economy, but no camps. What are the kids going to do? So if you're real working people and you have to go to work and you can't work from home, and you have a first grader and a third grader, you can't work this summer, and next September, if the current regulation still exists, there's no way to get the kids to school, so they're not going back to school.
Current regulations as far as what?
Social distancing.
How so?
How can you get them there? Freehold Township must have 150 buses.
Yeah.
A full-size bus fits 52 students. At 6 feet apart, it fits 6.
Oh,
So
God.
now you need to take a fleet of 150 buses, and you need 900, and they run a lot of fuel.
They
It's
run
gonna
a lot
be
of fuel and there's a lot of
impossible.
traffic.
impossible to get the students there. That has to lift or the schools can't open. If
Interesting.
schools can do one-way hallways, sounds like a smart idea. We can look to do different things like an A day, B day, AM, PM schedules to keep the schools less crowded, but you can't get them there. We have free and
So it's
appropriate
not
public
even a
education.
matter of-
We provide transportation. That's what public schools do. You can't get them there.
So this isn't even a matter of once they're there, how are you going to set up the classroom? How are you going to set up the school? A day, B day, like you said, morning, afternoon. It's the biggest hurdle is just physically, how do you get kids there under these regulations?
Correct.
What do you think the solution is?
There's not one. Goes back to, teaching days were different, but as an administrator and a supervisor, you're presented with problems, and often you want to, tell the people who are reporting to you that the problem is everyone has problems, but propose a solution. So don't come with a list of problems and no solutions in mind, because
Sure.
you're going to be excused from my office. It's very simple.
Yeah.
So, but if you have those solutions, and for this particular problem, the only solution is just we're going to go back to life as usual. And there is no new normal, because once you have 50 kids on a school bus, it's over. There is no way, we don't have the personnel to put an extra person in the back of the bus to ensure that the students are being socially distanced and aware, and it's impossible
Well,
in the
and
schools.
also too, you think about they're saying, oh, they're going to encourage kids to wear masks and things like that. I can't see that lasting more than the half an hour school bus ride in, if it
Even
lasts
if
at
they
all.
did
Even
do-
if they tried.
What is the consequence? There's
Well-
no consequence for not. I mean, sure, masks would be fine, but when you really think about how this is spread, that's not going to help a bunch of 7-year-olds and even 16-year-olds. It's not going to help them either. When you're looking at how it is that this virus was spread from person to person, kids get sick. It is what it is. They cough. They have seasonal allergies worse than adults do. It is what it is. They're just dirty.
Just
They're
dirty.
dirty.
Dirty kids.
They're
No,
dirty, dirty kids.
you're
Love
right.
them. But
Everybody
they're
that I
dirty.
know that has kids
Has
is
dirty
sick.
kids.
Well, they not only have dirty kids, but they're sick way more often than anybody else that I know because of the fact that you send your kids to school, and one kid at school is sick and doesn't want to tell his parents or whatever, somehow makes his way in, and then before you know it, it spreads around the whole class.
A
and
lot of the
everybody's sick.
parents have to go to work, which is why they send their
Yep.
kids to school sick, because they have to go to work, and that's going to be the problem. When you if you have to be in the office, say if I was a dentist and Sarah was a dental hygienist, you cannot work from home, obviously. We
Yeah.
have to go into our medical office. We do not have childcare. We would not have a way to get our kids to school. And to say obligation for parents to drive, you're starting to play with like constitutional issues.
Well, that's the other thing.
People, you can't take away busing.
You can't take away busing, and on top of that, the idea of, Murphy released his reopening plan, and the only way that we get back to the new normal, whatever that means, is if there's a widely available vaccine, which theoretically could take another 2 years.
It'll be February.
It'll
Jan,
probably,
Feb.
under normal circumstances, it would be 2 years. It'll probably be sooner. So does that mean that you're saying February? February's a long ways away. It's right now. It's
Oh yeah.
as of today. It's
You're into the
31st.
second semester of school, and there's a couple things you have to look at when you're like, looking at that perspective is, that some schools are opening. Like
Yeah.
some University of Notre Dame is those kids. They're going back. They're going to bring them back. They're doing a single session, meaning they're not going to have any time off. They're not doing long weekends, no Columbus
Right.
Day, and they're going to go from mid-August and get the kids out of there by early November. So
Okay.
they all come in, they stay, and they have a good plan. But also with that, in another one of these scientific historical perspectives is no one realizes that when you get the influenza shot, you're actually vaccinated for SARS.
really.
Yes.
How is that?
It's within the vaccine. You don't look at the label of all the different potions they have within the vaccines that they're giving us. So
Right.
literally, no one knows, but everyone who takes the flu vaccine, the influenza vaccine, is vaccinated for SARS.
So then how is it that, with that being the case, that COVID was so, because isn't COVID a version of SARS?
They're cousins, though.
Okay.
They're at best cousins. That would be the only way to describe, probably second cousins at that.
Okay.
So you wouldn't be able to look at your second cousin and say, why do they have red hair? And you know what I mean? I
Right,
think that
right,
it's a,
yeah.
I
No,
think
that
that
makes
it's a
sense.
different, it's a whole different monster. And even if you do have it, it's not, it takes again, it's the trials. It's why if you were to manufacture a virus, you do it on a pig, not on a human, because if you lose 100,000 pigs, nobody really
Right,
realizes
or
it. You know,
bats or
it is what it
whatever.
is. I mean, it would be considered as a study, and
Sure.
it has to happen, whether you agree with it or not. You know, it certainly has allowed science the opportunity to really like kind of grow exponentially along the way. But you know, so those are some of the perspectives. So it's not as easy as saying, oh well, we have a vaccine for SARS, so then we're just going to have one for COVID. And
Right.
they might, and if you had it, how can you then say, well, miraculously, this one we've already done the vaccine for, so you'll wait anyway, if it were the type of people who I believe would manufacture this. You let
What,
it run.
what
once
are the
it's
type
going.
of people that you believe would manufacture it?
It's the group of people who, you know, you don't realize that Alan Greenspan was the head of the Treasury Department, whatever his title is, for 30 years, and realizing that he's actually the one that's running the economy. Like literally, he's actually almost running our nation, and people don't understand how important like that interest rate is, and those single percentage points that they drive, and he's getting his information from somewhere. So there'd
Sure.
be
Yeah,
a group
absolutely.
of people who, you know, are the ones who are the real decision makers in, you know, regardless of politics, regardless
Right.
of business,
The
regardless
like,
of
secret society
lobbyists.
that
I
we
mean,
see in,
ish.
like,
I
you know.
would be accused of believing in a version of that.
Yeah.
I'd prefer to have a different name, but yes. I mean,
Well, I wasn't going to put a name to it.
yeah, it
but-
just is, you know, inspired from, you know, you could go with, you know, I get caught up in like Benjamin Franklin books, and you realize that it definitely could be possible that
Right.
he was the one who, you know, drafted the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and he was a rebel. He was basically running the country from Philadelphia to Boston. He
Yeah.
ran everything, and people, you know, and then I was reading, when you said proof or whatever, I was reading a book about Pythagoras.
Right.
And who knew that Pythagoras, just the guy that, you know, the Pythagorean theorem,
Sure.
but like his impact on government and social issues, it just like totally went way beyond what anyone would ever understand from just someone who was considered a mathematician, philosopher. So there are
Okay.
groups of people who, you know, they're beyond the financial side of it. They don't need to work.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
you-
they're
you're
kind of
invited into the group before you ever had a chance of failure. So
right.
and it would be a pretty tight group, but who knows?
Well, you'd have to imagine that there are still some people that we see pretty regularly that are in that group at this point that run the economy that, you know, conspiracies tend to form around. I'm not
Sure.
going to name any names, but
Right.
you know. So you believe that this would now going back to in China, if they were testing this, do you feel like this was an accidental leak into the human race, or do you feel like this was a deliberate, you know, in your words, stick a Chinaman and see what happens?
I would say deliberate.
Deliberate.
Maybe not intended to get as big as it got, but once it starts, you can't stop it.
Sure.
And when you
It's
look
gotta
at
go.
it in the sense of if we ever needed to, the Middle East in 2001 presented a very dangerous area, and so did it in the late 90s that people forget about. A book called The New Jackals is a worthwhile read, and he talks about all of these, Simon Reeve, I believe is his name, and he predicts all of these things that were going to happen in the future, and he was right spot on, and it was written well before the second Twin Tower bombing. The
Sure.
first one was in the late 90s with Ramzi Youssef. And if we need to stop them, you can't do it with Patriot missiles. You can't do it with Tomahawk missiles. You can't do it with Apache helicopters. You can't do it with F-16s. You can't beat them. You can't find them.
Right.
But you would be able to stick a bunch of camels, and you can't go crop dust a country.
Right.
to spread a virus around.
Right.
But you can find a way that that virus would spread with any human contact. So they got it. They got the one. SARS was contained. It only lasted a year. There was a couple little minor outbreaks of SARS after SARS happened.
Sure.
MERS was very quick. MERS came in, and its lethality is what killed it off so fast, because you didn't spread it for 12 days. You were dead before you could spread it.
Right.
So once that happens, you can actually quarantine for a week and then go back to normal life, because the virus, its own lethality will kill itself off.
Right.
So this one, they did it. They got the good one. They
Yeah.
may not even have known it when they did it, but if you were ever to need to control a region that crosses, country borders, obviously, whether
Well, sure. I mean, like,
Pakistan,
when this all
Iraq,
happened,
Iran, you name it, whatever you want. Put
Yeah.
South Korea on the list.
I mean, yeah, anywhere really, because when you think about it, like even just in the United States, travel was so open and we were so accepting of people from other countries, regardless of the reason that they were coming here, that it was almost like a powder keg waiting to happen if something like that were to come about, because now you have people traveling all over the world. You don't know who has it because it's active for such a long time, and they say that there's so many people that are asymptomatic, so they don't even know that they have it and they're carrying it and spreading it. And the country went from being very liberally open to everybody to being locked down in a matter of, I mean, I was up in Boston the beginning of March, and it was like
2 days.
It literally, it went from being totally 150% normal to within 48 hours the whole country went on lockdown. I remember being in the office on the last day. It was March 12th, and that day that the office is like, this might be a thing. We want everybody to start bringing their laptops home with them. Make sure that you can get connected to the network from home. And then that night, everything got locked down and it got real. And we, within a week of that, then it went from you can, go out, but it's only from, 5 a.m. to 8 p.m., which I think is ridiculous, because it's not like the virus is spreading.
Right.
It's not like the virus kills any less people between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m.
Gives the groceries time to wipe down.
You know what, though? They have a crew that comes in overnight anyway. It would be just as easily, they could just as easily bring in an additional crew to clean at the same time that they're restocking everything. I used to work in a grocery store.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't think that necessarily affects it. But it went from, we don't think that you should leave your house, to don't leave your house, wear a mask, very, 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 very rapidly. And people, all courtesy went out the window with that too. Because if you're at the store and you're standing even marginally too close, everybody had permission to kind of go after you and be like, back the fuck up. You're too close to me. Like, standing as far apart as we are right now is no more in public.
Right. And this is actually the appropriate distance. This is what the CDC originally said was 3 feet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, now they said that it could be even as far as up to 12 feet at one point.
You would have to have a pretty big sneeze.
Well, I think when you sneeze, the whole thing is with sneezes that if you don't cover, it can travel
Right.
something like 24 feet.
Which is why, from my perspective, I'm done going out. I'm done with public restrooms for a while. It'll be an interesting summer. Just be smart and safe. And, I think that people are going to be thirsting to get out. And they are. I mean, I'm sure that this weekend the Jersey Shore was crazy. Today was a little cool and breezy, but
Yeah,
I'm sure yesterday was absolutely nuts at the shore. And I'm happy for everybody to be down there doing their thing. And it's mostly people from the most dense area of this outbreak that are coming down to, our beaches, and going to let them do their thing. And hopefully they don't cause a situation that's going to impact our kids further with school.
Well, the thing with that is that you're starting to see states open up now, and they're not seeing the huge spikes that were predicted. They're still maintaining control over what's going on, and they're loosening the reins more and more and more. And I think that realistically, because like you can't live the rest of our lives under a rock and never go out and never go out to eat, never go out to bars and things like that. But I think that the positive that's going to come from this, like I said, I was up in Boston. I was up at a convention where there were 10,000 people in a pretty packed convention hall, and yeah, well, that was March, so I'm not, no way it could be active now. Um, the thing with that is what they did is rather than say don't come, don't do this, they encouraged proper hygiene.
Sure.
Don't touch your face if after you touch a surface. Wash your hands. They put in disinfectants every so many feet, so you can just walk up, get the disinfectant on your hand, and you can clean yourself. I think that is going to become, that's the positive of the new normal, because now people are just going to be more hygienic than they used to be, as opposed to just like, yeah, I don't really give a shit.
But also, and again, no credit to any government official or the CDC, who I do believe handled this well. There's no way to handle this well. I think
No.
Americans are far too stupid to handle this well, especially looking at our government as the ones who should tell us how to handle this well. Anyway, you have to also consider the fact that, when you look at the influenza virus, nasty virus kills plenty of people. So if you want to research the numbers that influenza would kill per year versus what corona or COVID did in 1 year, they're really not that far off, and there is no vaccine for COVID, which is worthy of note. But
Right.
ironically, no one gets the flu starting in April. So the most important thing to understand about whether COVID or one of the coronaviruses is that they are a version of the flu.
Sure.
So yes, Trump was right. He was just a little bit too late. He believed that it would breeze through by Easter. He was wrong, but he's right. The virus will breeze through. There
Sure.
will be pockets that have outbreaks. There will definitely be pockets
Absolutely.
for the next, until there's a vaccine, amount of time.
Well,
But it'll
and-
never be the same, because the virus is going to go from that. People were coming here from Italy, from China, back and forth, and spreading it all over before we
Yeah.
even knew it was real. And now the same concept that you never get the flu in May, people aren't going to get COVID either. So by the time July and August comes around, it will be life as usual. Besides the fact that
Do you know why
social
that is?
distancing.
Mostly,
Go for it.
think about what your environment in the winter is like. It's cold outside,
Oh, sure.
right? So you're inside, the heat is on, you're mostly dealing with recirculated air. And so if somebody's sick and you're exposed to that recirculated air, you're more likely, or rather, you're more likely to be exposed to the air that's recirculated, now currently carrying that virus, whether it's the common cold, the flu, or COVID, you're more likely to be exposed to it. As people go outside and are, in the springtime, you've got your windows open, you've got, a lot more going on outside of the home, there's less of a chance of you actually physically coming in contact with that virus.
Sure.
Because you're, out and about.
Vitamin D.
Exactly. And on top of that, when you look at the states that were hit the least of the more populated states, they're all southern.
Mhm.
They're either southern or they're very sparsely
Yeah,
populated.
Yeah.
And like, for example, Florida, if you go outside, they had a very low death rate,
Very
lower
low.
than New Jersey's.
Very low. 10%.
Yeah. And they are a state that's constantly warm, they can constantly be outside, and so they're not in that recirculated air as often as we are in a state where, winter here was relatively mild, but still,
Right.
you're not going to go
out and
sit on
about.
your patio, you're not sitting on your patio
Right.
when it's 50 degrees outside, 40 degrees outside, and so you're more exposed to what's happening.
Sure. And again, people are going to forget. All of this social distancing is going to go from 6 feet, and it'll just continue to get closer and closer.
Oh, yeah.
Shaking hands at work is probably over. Definitely casual hugs at work are over, not with family.
I
But
think that will
shaking
be
hands
that
is
way
the thing that's
for
going
the
to
next
go,
year.
or more. I
I-
think shaking hands will be an issue. Elbows.
I think
I
it's going to
just-
go to the like fist.
Yeah,
bump.
fist bumps, and people are going to be very aware of like when they did shake someone's hand to
Sure.
get to the bathroom as soon as possible. But again, like who knows with that transmittal, whether it's surfaces. You're talking about faucet handles.
Right.
You're talking about the
Well,
paper towel dispenser. You never
I know
know.
of somebody who you have to draw a line somewhere. Otherwise you live your life in a
Right.
bubble. I know somebody that would go to the grocery store. They would glove up in their car because they felt that that was the right thing to do. They would wear gloves and a mask in the store. They would then disinfect their gloves before they got in their car. They would disinfect again before they went in the house. They would take their shoes off at the door and spray them with Lysol. They would wipe down all their groceries with Clorox wipes and then wipe the Clorox canister with a Clorox wipe. And before they touched anything, would take off all their clothes and shower before they would unpack any of their groceries.
Unnecessary.
Well, that's my point.
We were smart to be careful with door handles.
Sure.
We were definitely smart with door handles, and our assumption was every time really the only places we've been are the grocery and Home Depot.
Sure.
But you have to assume that every time you go there that you get it. And
Right.
just come home and behave in the manner as if you got it. So once early on we did go out together, but we stopped going out together well before they suggested it because it was very easy. I could kick the doors, Sarah, I don't have to touch the door handles, and everything was just done efficiently and safely.
Right.
And that's what you have to do, like
Yeah.
you just have to be smart. I mean, being overreactive is there's really no reason
that
to
only
do that.
causes more panic.
Masks outside are going to be a huge problem because if you continue to demand that everyone wears masks outside, it's just going to make an issue between law enforcement and, if you have
Well-
groups of people gathering and law enforcement does need to break it up, if one of their concept is that no one has masks on, I guarantee you if you walk around the Manasquan Reservoir, any of the boardwalks, any of the beaches, nobody's masked. I'm sure there are
No,
some.
I'm sure that they're not.
Very few. There'll be more unmasked than masked out in
Agreed.
public situations outside, which in the reality is it's probably safe to be that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just be
Absolutely.
aware and try not to cross people. One way in the grocery store is fine. It'll probably be a wave of the future. Doesn't really matter that much to me. A couple extra steps, but some
Yeah.
of those things may stay, and it's going to be interesting. Bars are a thing, schools, and just people going back to work and childcare is just going to be a huge issue.
Yeah, I think that the mask thing is going to be something that goes pretty quickly.
It's got to.
It has to for
Maybe
for-
not in the stores though.
maybe,
But you can't go have a drink with a mask.
right. You can't go to a restaurant. Exactly. You're not going to do that. Nobody's going to do that.
Not doing it.
But like from I'm surprised that more places aren't being either vandalized or threatened or robbed because nobody can see your face.
Yeah.
So it's almost encouraging that I don't want to think the worst of people, but you would think that in a situation like this, if someone was already planning on doing that, now they can more easily infiltrate a building with a mask because they're now inconspicuous.
I mean, you can't laugh when you're getting your driver's license
Right.
picture taken, but now we never would have found
You'd
the
never
Boston
know.
Bombers.
Right. You'd never be able to find anybody. So I think that the mask thing needs to go. Also, the fact that they still maintain that N95 masks are the only thing that's truly effective against the virus because of the way that it seals and the level of filtration. And I see people outside that'll say, oh my God, they're wearing a mask. It's like, oh, there's so much pollen in the air. It's really getting to me. It's making me sneeze and stuff like that, and it's inside the mask. And my opinion on that is if pollen, which is, you can physically see the particles of pollen, if that can get into the mask,
Right.
what's stopping something that's so small that you need a high-powered microscope to see it from escaping the mask, if you have it?
Right.
It's an exercise. It's similar to, in my opinion, it's similar to airport security because airport security really doesn't, it just makes you feel good.
Right.
It doesn't really do what you think it does,
It's impossible.
but it makes you feel good. It makes you feel
Right.
like you're doing something.
It'll be a version of normal very soon.
Yeah.
4th of July.
I
Middle of
think
July.
without a doubt, 4th of July.
4th of July, it'll be, there will be reminders potentially for a decade, some of these reminders, and, you know, there will be some change, but in the end, no one changes. We have very short memories.
Yeah.
And, you know, take away even a vaccine, because it's going to be, or a lot of things have to happen before there's going to be a vaccine, including college football, NFL. You have
Yeah.
a lot of big,
A lot
big
of
ticket
things have to
things coming
happen.
on. Major League Baseball, they can take a season off. No one cares. Watch old games. It's the same stuff anyway. But when you start talking about NFL and college football, whether is it going to be empty stadiums?
I don't think
it'll
that they
be
would
interesting.
turn down the money.
It's going to be very interesting, but at some point, someone has to say, you don't have to be socially distanced. And
Yeah.
once that happens, it's got to be for everybody.
Right.
And, you know, it's very easy for the CDC to give the worst of news and to predict that this could come back and be even worse. Of course it could.
Sure.
Of course it could, but it's the same thing as predicting the weather.
Yeah.
Even if you're wrong, well, then we were overly prepared. Like Governor
Right.
Cuomo was the best.
Yeah.
He was fun to listen to, and I think he did a better job than our guy. But,
Right.
you know, Cuomo he was smart. He's like, if we're too prepared, that's great.
Right.
So
Because
be
the only thing
over-prepared.
when you look back 30 years from now, or even 2 years from now, if you're over prepared, nobody's gonna say, well, they went a little bit overboard, but
Right.
you know, they were safe. If you're in the opposite direction, potentially people could die.
Right. The first couple weeks, Route 9 was a ghost town.
Yeah.
You go up, drive through Six Lights. You would actually have moments where you'd be like, I can't believe in front nor behind there are
There are
no
no
vehicles.
cars, yeah.
There's not a vehicle on the road. And you can, as someone from here, I've lived here for a long time, that is not something you ever see
Yeah.
24/7. Literally, there's not a time when that exists. We had it multiple times for about 10 days.
Right.
And after that, it is traffic as usual in Monmouth County.
Right.
So there's a lot of people moving around, going a lot of different places that are not work. And, you know, it is what it is. Just get the kids going, keep the kids active. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
The kids are the ones getting hammered with this one, and they're not even
Oh,
getting
yeah.
sick.
Right. On that note, we are running out of time, so I want to say thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
And
Been a pleasure.
we'll have to do a follow up to part 2 for everything else that
Definitely.
you have to say.
Hey, there we go. It's the Wizards of Antiquity.
Yeah. That's